What is your favorite piece of art of all time? It's a question that you'll either immediately know the answer to, or a question that you'll have to deliberate for hours. Asking someone what their favorite thing is in many ways a deeply personal question. What you pick as your favorite piece of media in any given medium reflects so much of what your personality is and what exactly appeals to your tastes and sensibilities. So it's understandably a question that a lot of people have trouble answering, and I used to very much be in that camp as well. But nowadays, whenever I'm asked this question, or more so whenever I ask myself this question, one thing always comes to mind. Alvin and the Chipmunks 2, The Squeakquel. Silent Hill 2 is my favorite piece of art humans have ever made. Like, ever of all time. I have such a strange attachment to it in a way that's kind of hard to explain. And if I'm being honest, I'm not entirely sure I'm even ready to give my thoughts on it as I'm saying this now. But with the Silent Hill 2 remake coming up fairly soon, I wanted to get a video out before it's released so that my feelings on the original remain unfiltered. So this is going to be a video purely about the original Silent Hill 2, and it will be completely standalone and unaffected by the remake's release. Before we jump into the game proper though, I think it's important to establish how exactly I found out about it in the first place. Well, back when I was younger, I used to absolutely love video game reviews. I don't know what it was exactly about them, but I just really enjoyed hearing people who were passionate about games talking about games, even if they were games that I actually never ended up playing myself. I also really loved the slew of top 10 videos from this era for very similar reasons. I don't know how to explain it, but if you put your video into a list format and counted down from 10, I was all over that shit. And a lot of these channels would end up making top 10 horror game lists, and it was almost a guarantee that Silent Hill 2 would show up on those lists at some point. But there was one video in particular that really kickstarted my interest in the game and got me playing it for the first time. The video in question got me interested enough in Silent Hill 2 to get me to buy an old PS2 for cheap and order a second-hand copy of Silent Hill 2. And to say that it changed things is something of an understatement.
In my restless dreams, I see that town, Silent Hill.
Goddamn, I love this opening. I honestly remember just wanting to stay in this moment for as long as I could. It's so still, so peaceful, such a contrast to what the game itself will throw at you. And the music by Akira Yamaoka is just incredible. And the Silent Hill 2 OST is definitely up there in my all-time favorite album rankings just in general. It's all just so perfect. Okay, I should probably get on with the video now. In case you don't actually know, Silent Hill 2 is a game about a guy named James Sunderland, who receives a letter from his thought-to-be-deceased wife Mary, who died from an illness 3 years ago. In the letter, Mary beckons James to return to their special place of theirs in Silent Hill, a foggy little town in New England that manifests the trauma and emotions of whoever enters it into delightfully horrific monsters and eerily familiar reflections of places they've visited in the past. It's an instantly engrossing premise for a horror story, and I think the game lives up to it spectacularly. But before we actually get into that, I think we should probably discuss the actual gameplay of Silent Hill 2. In my opinion, Silent Hill 2 is a decent survival horror game. It isn't as polished or complex as Resident Evil, but it gets the job done. The guns feel good to shoot, melee's a little janky, but it's still got that good thwack to it. And in terms of the puzzles, I actually think they're better than Resident Evil puzzles. Although if you do have a problem with them, combat and puzzles have their own separate difficulty selectors, which is always nice to see. What the real strength of Silent Hill 2, though, in terms of its gameplay, is its exploration element, as well as just how well it handles its visuals and atmosphere. Despite the game being over 20 years old at this point, I still think it looks great in places. Sure, facial expressions and some animations can be a little bit stiff at times, but each building, each room, no matter how big or small, is packed with details and atmosphere and interesting world-building things that keep you hooked the entire time. Take this room early on in the game, for example. Whilst James is exploring the woodside apartment building, he can stumble across a very strange sight within a very strange room, specifically room 202. The apartment is covered in cages and completely lacking in any kind of furniture or decorations. However, as you walk deeper inside, you discover a room. But not just any room. A room lit in an ominous red with dozens of moths swarming around a dead butterfly. Strangest of all, though, is the hole in the wall excreting a neon green liquid, which James, of course, reads as an invitation to stick his hand inside. the hell was that about? It's never explained, never elaborated on, it just happens and you move on to the next ominous encounter, and I absolutely love that. And the game just in general does a really great job at preying on your own inherent morbid curiosity and continuously pushes you to see how far you're willing to go. There's just something about the gameplay loop of wandering around these derelict buildings, scrounging up supplies, and fighting enemies that works especially well in Silent Hill 2. I don't know if it's just the texture work or the sound design or the context of the story, but nothing feels quite like Silent Hill. And even if there was no story whatsoever, I feel like I would just be able to have fun exploring the town on its own. But speaking of that story, we might as well jump straight into it by going over one of the most important elements of that story.
I guess I really don't care if it's dangerous or not. I'm going to town either way.
James Sunderland is an interesting protagonist. He's fairly introverted, not particularly confident, pretty depressive at times, and comes across incredibly awkward when talking to other people, but it all feels 100% intentional. Guys see he pulls off the character pretty much perfectly. The soft voice, the hesitant mannerisms, the unique, if admittedly not always great delivery.
All I want from you is an answer.
James is such a standout character, and I do see a lot of myself in him, and I think a lot of people do, and someone who at the end of the day, we all end up rooting for.
It was you, wasn't it? You're the one who stepped on my hand.
I don't know. Maybe I did.
Laura is certainly a character. She's easily got the most screen time of any side character second to Maria, and is honestly the main driving force of the plot alongside Mary. If we want to talk about her actual character though, there are a few things that are actually kind of interesting. Laura, compared to all the other characters, seems to be completely unaffected by the influence of Silent Hill, with her never being overtly afraid of anything around her or taking the danger seriously in any way, which in turn leads to her often coming across a bit annoying, which is kind of what you should expect from an 8-year-old who thinks they're the main character of their own adventure. And I think because of that, I don't necessarily think that she's outwardly malicious despite some of her actions throughout the game. In fact, if you look at it from a different angle, she's almost helping James in a certain way. She's constantly pushing the narrative forward and getting James closer to Mary. She'll often bring Mary up and chastise James for not thinking about her enough. And you could almost see some of her attempts to stall progress, like when she kicks the keys away, as actually forcing James to confront his issues. Now follow me here. I mean, if these monsters represent trauma and mental illness, then when James confronts them and beats them, he's confronting and beating his own personal demons. So with that in mind, Laura is pretty much a saint who's never made a mistake ever. Okay, maybe that last one was a little bit of a stretch for you, but there is a lot more going on below the surface with Laura. At least we can all agree with that. Also, just as a side note, I want to say that Jacqueline Breckenridge, who played Laura, is genuinely great. Like, she plays the part exactly how it's meant to be, which is pretty impressive considering that she was around the same age as Laura at the time, and was also doing mocap in an era when that wasn't normalized. So, props to you, Jacqueline Breckenridge.
This town is full of monsters. How can you sit there and eat pizza?
Eddie is a little bit of an odd character in all honesty. He's dumb, overweight, cowardly, slurs his words, loves eating pizza, and is just generally pretty pitiable. But that's also kind of the entire point of his character. He's almost a comically easy target for the kind of bullying that he talks about having gone through, and it makes you drop your guard ever so slightly even when some of the more disturbing elements of his personality begin to develop over the course of the game. With Eddie, you get the sense that he's got this very deeply rooted frustration about the way his life has turned out. And clearly it's because of the bullying that he experienced throughout his life. Specifically, I think he's frustrated at the way his school life went, and how despite the fact that those years are supposed to be the best years of your life, because you look the way you look, you're somehow not allowed to enjoy those in the same way. And I genuinely do believe that feeling anger about that and about having missed out on those times is perfectly valid, because it isn't fair how some people are treated based on what they look like. But at the end of the day, school doesn't last forever. But I do get the impression that Eddie hasn't let go of that anger, and because of that, you get this sense that Eddie is at a breaking point, with him genuinely being kind of effectively unsettling at times. Even though I'd say that the performance of Eddie is probably the weakest of all of the cast, Eddie still has so many great lines, and Dave Shawfleet is doing exactly what the role calls for.
Killing a person ain't no big deal. Just put the gun to their head, pow. It doesn't matter if you're smart, dumb, ugly, pretty. It's all the same once you're dead. And the corpse can't laugh.
And quite frankly, the game wouldn't be the same without him. Also, I love you, Dave Shawfley. Please don't kill me.
Do it again.
It doesn't matter who I am. I'm here for you, James. See? I'm real.
Maria is a lightning in a bottle kind of character. Monica Taylor Horgan plays the character with so much humanity and personality that it's honestly a massive shame she didn't go on to be a big name in general. Guys see his performance usually gets more praise, and I do think a lot of that praise is deserved because he is so great, but Maria is just perfectly performed and has some of the best lines in the entire game.
You're coming with me?
You were gonna just leave me?
No, but...
With all these monsters around?
No, I just...
Anyway! What do you mean, anyway? You don't sound very happy to see me.
My name is Maria. I don't look like a, ghost, do I?
But who exactly is Maria? Well, she's a woman James meets early on in the game during an excursion to Rosewater Park, and upon James seeing her, mistakes her for his deceased wife, with the two sharing an uncanny resemblance. However, despite this, Maria is nothing like Mary in terms of her personality and demeanor. Maria is flirtatious, confident, and energetic in a way Mary never could be in the later stages of her life. However, Maria is also volatile, mysterious, and often reliant upon James in a way that contradicts a lot of what you may have perceived her to be when they first met, and it makes her so much more human. And because of that inherent uncertainty within Maria, it made the back and forth between her and James fascinating to watch. We never really know what to think of her. Even when it seems like she's put all her cards on the table, you still feel like she's probably got an ace up her sleeve. And there is just something incredible about a game from 2001 having a character that complex and that human. But I still wouldn't say that Maria is the character that I relate to the most. From here on out, there's going to be major spoilers for the rest of Silent Hill's story. If you want to play the game for yourself, I'd recommend looking up the Enhanced Edition, which basically makes the game playable on PC, or you could buy a PS2 and an original copy if you have that in your budget, but I digress.
Oh, it's you.
Yeah, I'm James.
Angela.
Angela, okay. I don't know what you're planning, but there's always another way.
Really?
Angela is the character I think about the most when I think about Silent Hill 2. A lot of this is for personal reasons that I'll get into a bit later, but even ignoring all of that, Donna Burke's performance is so unique, and certainly does take some time to get used to, but is ultimately really great at conveying who Angela is as a character, with some of her awkwardness and stilted dialogue being very much intentional. Despite the fact that she really doesn't directly impact the main narrative that much at all, she's the first character the player interacts with, continues to appear throughout the game even when she isn't story relevant, and is also on the front cover of the game itself. And there's something interesting about that. She's given such a large amount of screen time despite her lack of relevance to the main plot, in part because her story is just too important. And I don't mean that for the game itself, but more so for the people behind the scenes who clearly cared about getting this story out there. And I for one can say that I am incredibly glad that they did. So now here comes the more personal portion of the video where I start explaining some things. So much like Angela, I also didn't have the best home life for a number of years, and although I'm glad I never suffered anything as awful as what is implied to have happened to Angela, there was physical and emotional abuse. And I can truly say that Angela's demeanor and confused emotions and so many of her lines feel incredibly authentic.
Maybe you think you can save me. Will you love me? Take care of me? Heal all my pain? That's what I thought.
I just saw so much of myself being reflected back at me, and at the time it really did genuinely scare me a bit. I so desperately wanted things to work out and for that person to turn over a new leaf so that we could just go back to the way things were, but that was never going to happen. When it comes to family, you always give them the benefit of the doubt, especially when it's someone who's been present in your life for so long. And because of that, no matter how much they've hurt you, even if you know deep down that you'll never be able to forget what they did, and never be able to forget how awful it made you feel. If they show even an ounce of affection or kindness after the fact, you start justifying their actions. You start believing that you can help them change, and that one day maybe all of this will blow over. But of course, the cycle just continues onward. So when I see Angela, I see someone who is in that cycle and someone who has been in it for a long time. And it genuinely breaks my heart a bit when I think about it, because I remember so vividly what it was like to live that. So to imagine that somebody had gone through that for most, if not all of their life, that really upset me. And because of that, I felt, and still do to some extent, this deeply personal connection with Angela as a character, and a connection that might be hard for someone who hasn't been in that situation to understand.
It's hot as hell in here.
You see it too? For me, it's always like this.
But I can honestly say that I'm grateful that that connection existed in the time that it did. And I just want to say from the heart that if you feel like you're going through a similar experience, there are people who can help you. I know it's a generic thing to say, and people are probably sick of hearing about it. I was certainly sick of hearing about it, but it's true. And I just want to tell you that if things are bad right now, they will get better. I was in a similar place not that long ago at all, and I can really say I understand how that feels. I understand how hard it is, but that if you do reach out, people will absolutely come and help you. Okay, good. Whew. All of that's done. The depressing part of the video is over. Now it's time to move on to a section of the video that I'm sure won't have any discussions of dark subject matter or mental health issues. Never mind. If you remember a few monologues ago, I mentioned how the monsters of Silent Hill are manifestations of the protagonist's trauma and experiences. So with that in mind, these creatures should all tell us something about James as a character. But I mean, what else is there to know about James? Well, let's find out, starting off with... The Lon Figure is the first monster that you encounter in the game, and certainly sets you up for the kind of monster design you should be expecting throughout the rest of the game. Masahiro Ito designed all of these creatures, and they are just wonderfully grotesque, with the Lon Figure having what looks like a straitjacket of skin over its arms and torso. Oddly enough though, its legs are exposed and fairly identifiably feminine, with the cancerous tumors underneath its feet looking almost like platform shoes or high heels. It is still the first enemy of the game though, so it isn't too difficult to deal with, but they are still pretty creepy throughout the entire game. And plus they crawl away like spiders, which is fucking terrifying. The mannequins are up next on the list, and although I don't think they're the scariest design-wise out of all the monsters, I think what really makes them unnerving is the way they move, specifically how they kind of twitch about in this really uncanny way. And of course that does make sense considering the fact that the mannequin is basically just two bottom halves of a female mannequin fused together. And now, I don't like reading into things, as you all know, but follow me here. Mannequins, as in real life ones, are quite literally objects made to be leered at. And the fact that the in-game mannequins only consist of two pairs of legs being a body part of a woman that is often viewed voyeuristically, you don't have to be a psych major to figure out what exactly might be going on here. But then again, maybe I'm just assigning meaning to something completely arbitrary. Surely James doesn't have some kind of weird, deeply rooted misogyny and sexual frustration. I mean, the mere prospect of it is utterly ridiculous. Okay, well, maybe not. Sure, the actual designs of the nurses are nowhere near as sexualized as, say, the nurses from Silent Hill Homecoming, but they still do show some skin in a way that doesn't feel too fanservice-y. And once again, just like with the mannequins and the Lon Figure, the nurses take on feminine physical traits and have none of their faces showing. But wait, this can't be right, can it? James is a married man, he's our protagonist, we've been with him through this entire ordeal. I mean, not even all of his enemies are women. Finally, a character with absolutely nothing going on beyond the surface level. He's just a guy with a triangle on his head. Why'd you try to assign meaning to everything? Surely he isn't being roped into any of this. Well, I think they've made it pretty clear there. Once again, I hate reading into things. But could the scene where the most prominent male monster in the game assaults and tosses around the female objectification metaphor potentially have some kind of subtext? Well, turns out the game itself has something to say about Pyramid Head, as rather uniquely, an interpretation of his purpose is explained through dialogue unlike any of the other monsters.
I was weak. That's why I needed you. Needed someone to punish me for my sins.
Punish? What does James have to feel guilty about?
Are you taping again? Come on. I don't know why, but I just love it here. It's so peaceful. You know what I heard? This whole area used to be a sacred place. I think I can see why. It's too bad we have to leave. Please promise you'll take me again, James.
So in case that wasn't clear, yes, James killed Mary. It's what all these cryptic messages were referring to. It's why he's been faced with watching her doppelganger be killed multiple times in front of him. It's why he's in Silent Hill to begin with. But why did he do it? Well, in one of the best aspects of the game's story, it's never really given a definitive answer. We're given certain perspectives and possible motivations, but we're never given an objective answer, and I absolutely love that. As I've said time and time again, this game captures flawed and complicated humans perfectly. And because of that, the reasons why James killed Mary are just as complex as you might expect. Did James kill Mary to put her out of her misery? Did he love her so much that he didn't want to see her suffer anymore? Did a part of Mary really want to die? Well, yes. But then again, did James kill Mary because he hated her? Did he hate how he couldn't do the things he used to be able to do because of her illness? Did he hate her for lashing out at him for years during her treatment? Well, yes again. And the fact that there are also multiple endings muddles everything even further. If you get the leave ending, in which James leaves Silent Hill with Laura after Mary tells him to continue living, you may start to view James in a more favorable light, as Mary is essentially forgiving him and offering him a second chance. But then if you got the Maria ending, where James leaves Silent Hill with Maria after rejecting Mary's attempts to make him feel guilty, with this little exchange taking place between Maria and James after the fact,
You'd better do something about that cough.
then you might get the sense that James was fueled by selfishness, and that he's doomed to repeat this cycle over and over again. Personally though, I got the in-water ending first time round, where after the revelation of what he's done, James admits Mary's body has been in the trunk of his car this whole time, and that he plans to commit suicide by driving his car into Toluca Lake. Perhaps making you feel as though James does really feel guilty, which could really mean that the murder was fueled by selfish desire, and he's just too ashamed of that to continue living. It's also important to mention though that you actually get these endings through your gameplay decisions. And I don't mean that in a dialogue wheel telltale kind of way, but in a way that is based more on your personal playstyle as a player. For example, in order to get the leave ending, which is generally considered to be the happiest of the endings, you must keep James's health high, as well as look at multiple reminders of Mary throughout the game. These may seem like random, unrelated things, but when you think about it in the context of the leave ending, it kind of makes perfect sense. James keeping himself healthy and thinking of Mary often makes the leave ending where he decides to admit his guilt and go on to redeem himself make a lot more sense. Through our actions throughout the game, James has shown that he still has some fight left in him and that he really did care about Mary. But for something like the Maria ending, you kind of do what you'd expect. Spending as much time as possible with Maria, making sure she doesn't take too much damage, and not looking at Mary's letter or other reminders of her all contribute to you getting towards the Maria ending. Essentially making it seem as though this version of James isn't all that interested in Mary, and would rather move on with Maria, and has essentially ignored the lesson that is being taught to him. And then for the in-water ending, you do things that honestly work the best thematically, in my opinion, neglecting your well-being by having your health below 50% for long periods of time, examining the knife Angela almost commits suicide with multiple times, and reading numerous depressing journal entries and notes all add to this idea that James is at the end of his rope, and that his actions after the truth has been revealed are within character for that playthrough's version of James. Now, those aren't the only endings, of course. Yeah, but those are the ones that you can realistically get in your first playthrough. And just this idea overall is such an inventive way of handling multiple endings, and although I have nothing against more straightforward dialogue decisions, I think ideally I'd like to see more games kind of intertwine long-term gameplay decisions with some of these more simple dialogue-based decisions. And it's just super impressive to me that a game that is this old managed to do something like that. And just the game in general, especially for that time, is so deeply complex and psychological in a way that I don't think a lot of games at the time were. Silent Hill 1 definitely had some of these darker themes, but Silent Hill 2 puts them at the forefront of the story, and really embraces exploring the moral grey area of life. Which finally brings me on to the title of the video. I truly and honestly believe that Silent Hill 2, as well as the original video and the channel that it was on that recommended it, was instrumental in getting through some of those really dark times in my life. In that original video, the topic of mental health was brought up, and when that person went on to talk about their experiences with depression and anxiety, I just started noticing how similar my feelings were to theirs. And then when I started playing the game for myself, I once again just kept on noticing these parallels. Angela was the main one, but I still felt my emotions and thoughts mirrored in the other characters too. And for as embarrassing as it's going to sound to say this out loud, it really did feel like this insane revelation to me at the time. I realized that what I was feeling wasn't a normal part of growing up, and that there was something wrong, even if I couldn't put my finger on exactly what it was at the time. Now, of course, I wasn't instantly cured or anything. I still very much do have depression and symptoms of PTSD to this day, but I just know deep down that if I had never stumbled across that video, and if I had never played Silent Hill 2 at the time that I did, then I would still be trapped in that cycle today. And because of that, I can't not value Silent Hill 2 as highly as I do. Even though I don't play Silent Hill 2 as much as I used to, no matter how long of a gap I have, I can always just jump straight back into it with no issue whatsoever. Those streets, those sounds, those characters, those moments, they're a part of me now. And I'm sure it's just some kind of trauma bonding that is really making me so attached to this game, but I also feel like ignoring all of that, there is just something special about Silent Hill 2. The right people at the right time came together to make the best game they could. And I just want to say to Team Silent and everybody who was involved in the creation of Silent Hill 2, thank you so much. And now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go ahead and touch some grass. Wow. Would you look at all that grass? I mean, there's just so much grass over there, quite frankly. There's almost too much grass over there to be touched that I can't even show you the amount of grass that's over there to prove that I've touched it, because there's just so much. But I don't know why I'm doing this bit, because there is actually grass there, but I feel like I've committed to the bit now, so I won't just turn the camera around. So anyway, thank you so much for watching the video. This was a long one, obviously, and it took a long time to make. That's really just because I was busy with other stuff going on. I also was working on some other videos on Two People Talk About. And also, it's just like a topic that sometimes you don't want to get up and do that. You don't want to focus on those sorts of things. Sometimes you just want to fucking do other things other than think about that stuff. But I felt like the video was important. Not just important to me, but I don't know, maybe someone out there could find something relatable in it, or something enjoyable, or I don't know. I mean, I'm pretty much inflating my own ego here, but I don't know, maybe someone got something out of it. Also, yes, I know this is late, and I still haven't played Silent Hill 2 Remake as of this, and that's simply just because I've been busy working on this video, and I didn't want to have to change anything last minute based upon my thoughts on the remake. So I just haven't bothered playing it. I mean, I might make a video on it. If you know, when I find the time to play it, I'll probably make a video on it, or at least post something in the community tab about my thoughts. But until then, I kind of want to wait a bit until I play it, actually, just because I know that a lot can happen in sort of the media storm immediately after something's released. So I think it genuinely might be best just to wait a bit, maybe wait like a few months until everything's sort of cleared up, and then just be able to play the game independently and see how I feel about it, because I want it to be good, I really do, because like I said before in this video even, like Silent Hill 2 is a game that isn't really that accessible on modern consoles. Like, I think you can play the HD collection backwards compatible on the 360, but the HD collection has its own set of issues. The best way to play it is the enhanced edition, like I talked about in the video, but it's a game that isn't super accessible, so for a remake, it's very important to get things right. And so long as they don't, like, fuck around with the story, I think it should be fine. It should be a it should be a home run, pretty much. Also, I actually did pre-order the game, and I was supposed to get a James Sunderland jacket, but that hasn't arrived yet, so I'm just wearing a regular one of my jackets, which is sort of vaguely James-esque. And as you'll notice, the camera angle is very close up to my face, and that's simply because I didn't know what shirt to wear, and I just checked, and none of like the presentable shirts that I had were available. So what I've got is a Space Jam shirt. I don't think I've ever watched Space Jam in my entire life. I think this might have been a charity shop pick, and I couldn't tell you why. I couldn't tell you why I've got it, why I've still got it. But there you go. That says something about my judgment and why the camera angle is so high. But anyway, regardless of that, thank you so much for watching. I really don't know when the next video will be. I'm just going to I feel like I've learned that trying to set a schedule is kind of pointless. I'll just see how it goes. If something strikes me that's interesting, I'll make something about it. If it doesn't, I won't. We'll just see how it goes. But it was a hard video to make, both in terms of just actually editing around it and recording footage and things like that, but also just obviously the subject matter isn't the most fun isn't the most fun topic for a video. But I genuinely felt like I needed to make this video at some point, and I figured with the remake coming out, well, it's already out now, but with the remake coming out, or having come out, this was a good time to do it. So I just want to say thank you very much. It means a lot to me that somebody would watch this far, and I love you guys a lot, so thank you very much. And now, it's time to touch some grass. I'm still not willing to show the grass for the sake of the bit. I can't tell you why, though. I cannot tell you why.